What's up, YouTube? Coming at you with another interview with one of my favorite saxophone players on the New York scene today, originally from North Carolina. I'm talking about none other than the enormously talented Chris Bittner. I first learned about his playing and became aware of him because he was studying with one of my first mentors, amazing saxophonist Chad Eby. Chris studied with Chad at UNC Greensboro and learned a ton of great information from him. So much, in fact, that Chris was well equipped to move to New York City and attended the Juilliard School of Music and has gotten to perform with some of New York City's greatest musicians. Since first hearing him play, I've always been impressed with his technical prowess and musical spontaneity. It was great to get to sit down and ask him some questions about how he feels and thinks. I found his positivity with regards to the subject of music to be very contagious, and I think you will feel the same way after listening to this interview. Enough for me, let's hear from the one and only Chris Bittner. Let's just jump right into it. Chris Bittner, thank you so much for coming on and agreeing to do this today. Looking forward to asking you some questions, man, so thank you for your time in advance.
Oh, thank you. I'm very excited.
Yeah, man, me too. We got 6 questions here. So the first one is just going to be, what was your major, if you can remember like one specific time where you had an epiphany or a light bulb moment with improvisation and like where you're realizing like this is super fun to do. And what was that like, and how did that lead to you deciding that you wanted to be a professional musician?
I see. Well, I think my epiphany was, I think at a time after I'd already sort of figured out that I wanted to be a professional musician.
Nice.
I believe, I mean, I think I'm sure there's many moments that were like that where I was like, oh, this is great. You know, this is something I want to continue to do. And specifically in regards to improvising, I was in college. I think I was maybe a sophomore, and our big band they were doing a version of Sing 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 that like the Carnegie Hall big band does. It features Dick Oates. It's like John Faddis. I think it might be led by John Faddis. I could be very wrong, so I'm not sure. But it's this crazy arrangement of Sing 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 that again features Dick Oates playing soprano. And the reason this moment for me was such an eye-opening thing is because for the majority of this feature, it's just Dick Oates and I believe Lewis Nash playing duo.
Right.
And there's no form. There's nothing. Saxophone and drums. And again, in college, I was playing Dick Oates' part. I was the featured soloist that was playing with the drummer. And at that time, I had never really done anything like that. You know, I was like still really trying to get into playing changes and understanding how to do that sort of thing.
Right.
So at this point, like the idea of playing quote unquote free or open, you know, no form or anything like that, I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like I had no idea how to do it. And I just remember sitting in the practice room with my soprano, like, and playing just along to drum backing tracks, just trying to like play something, anything that would continue ideas that again weren't necessarily related to any sort of tonal center at that moment, you know. So for me, I was like, oh, this is wild, and it was like challenging, but at the same time pushed me into a direction where I was like, okay, it's great to be able to just continue spitting out ideas like all the time. And then, you know, something I tell students also is like from that, I like worked backwards and then implemented like all the stuff that I was dealing with harmony to then put it into place. But I was like, I basically learned then you can just keep going and like use your mistakes as more fuel to like weave more ideas going as you're like improvising completely in the moment, not thinking about changes or anything like that.
Yeah, man, that's super heavy and like a great concept that like, I don't know. I mean, for me, I feel like I arrived at that maybe a couple of years ago or something, but like when you make that distinction of I don't have to be bound to this harmony that the page is telling me to play. Yeah, it's such a great thing. So you knew that you wanted to be a professional musician before then, but
I guess
like that epiphany was like kind of sealed the deal, I guess you could say.
Sort of. I was like, okay, I was like, all right, there's no rules. At least in that context, there were no rules. Of course, there are sometimes rules that we all have to sort of follow, musically speaking, but I was like, no, these can be broken.
Yeah.
I was like, but I didn't know how to break them. You know,
right.
I didn't know what to play at all.
Yeah.
I was like all this bebop sounding stuff. It just did not it just didn't really fit at that moment, you know.
Sure. Yeah. You just feel pretty limited. You just end up playing like the same things over and over again. And it's not probably what you were hearing. Oh, I love that. That's a great answer. Yeah. Very cool. So yeah, question number 2 is, what's one thing you've been working on like recently in the practice room? And this is where I've been getting a lot of different answers, even though I think we all kind of have like our maintenance schedule, just keep up on things. But I'm super curious, like what's in the last 2 weeks, what have you been focusing on specifically?
I would say triads, really, and sort of just intonation. It's kind of funny. That's always been like a horrible thing for me. So I've been working on pitch, but triads really more for like tangible things that involve like creating and improvising. Yeah, triads, different like inversions. I mean, basic stuff. Like I'm always going back to like really easy things, but with the nature of trying to play triads, I'll try and use them to create like pseudo classical sounding etudes, and like I'll use the triads to just move through different like harmonic sequences again at random, like improvised, but trying to limit myself. It's a pretty sound. It's so basic, but it's pretty.
I've always been curious about that, like listening to you in some of your posts on Instagram and stuff. When you're improvising harmonic sequences, like what dictates that line of shed? You know, how do you decide where to go next when you're improvising the actual chords that you're playing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I'm always thinking, as I tell people, like students that I teach, when I'm doing that, if I'm playing free, right? If I'm just playing by myself, which I do a lot, you know, not gonna lie. I'm just it's a hobby for me. I'm just playing the horn. Like I just want to play it. And I think when I'm sort of in that headspace and just creating literally like right then, I think it's, again, I'm shifting between key centers more so than I'm thinking about playing changes, and letting each individual, like letting the relationship from one note to the next influence where I think the next tonal center wants to go. I'm thinking more in like purely interval based frame of thought from one note to the next. I talk about like melodic weight, where I'm like, well, what is it going to sound like if I play a major sixth above the note I'm currently playing? And then thinking, once that note registers and that sound is what I wanted, then I'm like, well, what can I make that note now in relationship to a new chord? So I'm thinking all the time, like what one note at any given time could be against any chord. You know?
Yeah.
Does that make, you know what I mean? Like,
oh, totally. Yeah.
I hear people talk about pivot notes and things like that. It's kind of like that, but with key centers. You know, I'm making up my own common tones as I go.
Yeah, no, it's really great and inspiring to listen to, because it's kind of along the same lines as the, you know, shedding the sing thing, like where you have to like force your brain to kind of do these things that wouldn't naturally do it, but that's what you're practicing, to making it natural.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like I said, the sing thing really did change my approach to just like improvising in general. You know, and like trying to search for something in the moment, which sounds kind of corny, but it's kind of true.
Yeah, I mean, it's cliche. Everybody says they're doing that, but yeah, that's what we got to do to make it right, you know, like make it feel right for everybody.
Right.
Great, man. Yeah, these are awesome answers. Next question is, who was the last saxophonist or just musician you listened to, thought to yourself like, wow, this is amazing? And that could be in a variety of different forms. Again, like if you heard on Spotify, or even if it was like an Instagram post or a live performance, or just you're on the gig listening to the piano player solo or something like that. Like what inspires Chris Bittner? The last person I listened to on Spotify, saxophone player, I think was Lee Konitz. But the last person that I saw play live who really hit me, who always does every time I see them and hear them, I've seen them quite a few times, is Joe Lovano. I saw him at Smoke when he was there, like not that long ago. I think it was a few weeks ago. But Lovano for me is always someone, and John Coltrane. They're two of my favorites, you know, for many different reasons. You know, there's a wide spectrum of saxophone players that I really enjoy. But recently, again, seeing Lovano at Smoke, I was sitting right in front of the stage, you know, like right there, and they renovated it, and it looked nice, and it was a whole thing. It was just incredible, and he was just right there doing his thing, still sounding so amazing. You know, he's getting up there in age now, but like, I mean, was still just dealing. And they played all Monk tunes, so like Lovano, you know, and if you like Lovano, him playing a Monk tune is amazing, and it was like an entire night of just Monk. So that really was doing it for me. Big time. That's amazing. I love it. Was he like promoting any kind of album as a part of that, or was it just, you know, we're going to play Monk tunes tonight?
I don't remember.
If
Right.
there's like a Lee Konitz track that stands out to you that you recently listened to, or a Coltrane track where it just kind of made you like reappreciate how heavy these dudes are. Not that we ever stopped appreciating them, but like, was there any one thing that stood out to you on either of those?
Mm, I mean, with Coltrane, just I don't know. There's so much. I think Crescent might be my favorite album. Not recently. I haven't listened to that recently, but it's still that whole thing, as well as many others. But especially
Totally.
Crescent, just like always comes back to me as like weight. So I would, if you want to log an answer, I'd say that.
Yeah.
Probably.
No, that's great. It's really not a fair question because there is so many different answers and so many things that inspire. That's kind of why I put the time constraint on it. But like even so, like that's still a great answer. Like that's something you would go back to if you were looking for that inspiration. So that's killing. Well, yeah, great answer. Thanks for that. Okay, so this is totally unrelated to any of that stuff. This is more for like the gear nerds out there. But what is your current setup on tenor?
Well, I bounce between my Mark 6 and a John Ledbetter like JL custom horn. I bounce between those. And with those, God, this is such a loaded question because never in my life have I owned this much gear.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, it's hilarious now, actually. Because I play the same mouthpiece, I play the same reeds. I play a Boston Sax Shop E series. It's a 9, I think, with number 4 or 3.5 Boston Sax Shop reeds. But I like the number 4s a little better usually, but I do go between both. And again, Salmer Mark 6 or a JL Custom, I really play them about equally. And then on the Mark 6, though, I'm using a Boston Sax Shop neck as well.
Cool.
And a Boston Sax Shop ligature as well. Does that cover all of it? Was that everything?
That's reeds? Perfect. I think the biggest thing, that sometimes can get left out, or just I always leave myself like wondering when people are talking about this and they leave it out, is just like the tip opening and the reed, where the tip and the reed are meeting, those kinds of things, like because like those make the biggest difference.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And that's like your setup is super resistant. It sounds like I would be able maybe to be able to play like a middle C on that.
Well, that's the thing. It does sound like it would be, but it doesn't feel like it. And it's so strange because the reason I've over the last several years gravitated more to more open and harder reeds is that for some reason, I just think I'm doing something very wrong. Because for some reason, when I try and go down, because sometimes I think, well, maybe if I went down, all this would be easier. But when I try and slip back to more closed mouthpieces and softer reeds, it actually makes it feel to me like there's more resistance for some reason.
Huh. Yeah.
Which is completely backwards. I know.
It's just such a testament to how unique all of us are.
It just doesn't feel like it takes my air right when it's smaller. I don't get it. Yeah.
No, that's cool. It's great to hear those things like vocalized too. What's the serial number on your tenor? Like what year about is that from?
Oh, it's 100 X, 100 yada yada yada, right. Which I think is from 1962.
Nice.
And I actually bought it from, I play the JL as well. I actually bought my Selmer from John Ledbetter as well.
Oh, killer!
Like back in the day.
Nice.
It's been I don't know 8-10 years, something like that I've had that horn.
Yeah, that's a great number from what I've heard.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. It's a lovely one.
Nice. Cool. Next question. What is the most favorite and memorable gig that you've ever played? And this could be because of the musicians you played with, or because of the location of the gig, or the music you were playing, and what was so special about it for you. I'm sure there's a lot. Like the heavier the players that I've asked this to, like everybody, nobody says just one, like right off the bat.
There is one that is, I mean, there's so many. They're all special, honestly. Like every gig that I've done has done something. I approach every gig with like a sense of excitement and joy. I certainly have not played at Smalls very often, but the first time that I ever got to play there for a gig, every time I have ever performed at Smalls, which is not many times, right? Yeah. I feel this weight. Because of the what's the word?
The prestige, I guess.
That's the word. That's the word I was searching for, right? And I was like, that's great. And I was playing there, not with my band. I don't know if I should say whose band it was or not. It doesn't really matter. But I was like, wow, this is really cool, you know. And it
Hmm.
was a great band, and it was just like there was an energy there that I got to experience for the first time in a way that, you know, I had never experienced before. You know, that's one, but like that is still not the right answer for me. You know, there's it's too, gosh, it's too much.
No, there's so much, but I love your answer of just that every gig is special to you, because I mean, I think as musicians we're so lucky to get to do this and even make money doing this. You know, it's kind of incredible and can be mind blowing sometimes. Like, we get to play things the way that we want to play. It's such a gratifying and rewarding process, and that's one thing. You know, I see a lot of people like getting into wanting to learn how to improvise. You know, like
Right.
people even at all ages, you know, young ages, older cats that are doing it as hobbyists, they're genuinely interested in the art form. And I think that appeal is because of these things, you know, because what we do is so magical, you know, like just to us, you know, it's just such a healing, can be a healing thing. And once you reach a certain level and have a respect for it, like that you clearly do, yeah, every gig can be special. For me, I mean, I get torn between answering that question from like the nostalgic side of things, like playing for, you know, your parents, you know, or years after they've heard you play the first time, and then you're playing in a professional situation, and then they see that, and it's like that can be super special, you know. Maybe if the gig wasn't like the best gig ever, but like just the fact that you are doing that is like,
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like, it's also a tricky, difficult question for me to answer because, like, you know, I don't think I've ever really played like a big gig, like any sort of monumental, like groundbreaking, career shifting type of thing, you know. But I say that to say that, like, I have played many gigs that many would view as like a drag, you
yeah.
know, society gig, what all that type of stuff. But 9 times out of 10, for whatever reason, and I'm sure this is normal, I'm sure this is across the board a thing that most people would probably say, but for some
Mhm.
reason, those types of gigs can bring out the best qualities of like of the creative spark in things. Like I really
Yeah.
enjoy kind of, you know, oh, here's a restaurant gig where you're playing tenor trio, you know, and you're just playing standards. But like, if the people aren't listening, which is a drag if they're not, you know, here you are with like your friends just throwing down, just playing,
Hmm.
just like
Yeah.
playing what you want, how you want it to. And
Yeah.
like, there you go. You play the gig, and at the end of the day, you go home and like you got to speak, you got to create
Yeah, and that's why those moments, like, they can come from anywhere. I mean, I saw
anywhere.
something on your Instagram recently, and I could tell like the people were there to just socialize or hang out. I don't know exactly where it was, where you were playing at, because I hadn't heard of the venue before. But you guys were playing, like, I hear Rhapsody or something, and somebody had recorded it from their cell phone because they realized something special was happening. Like, they didn't know, they
Mm.
probably weren't even jazz people, but they recorded it because they were just like, oh, this is like, this is insane. And these people are emitting this like positive energy, and they probably just decided to record it because they recognized that, you know, it was just there because you were just like emitting it. I love that answer, that just every gig is special, you know, because it's
It
very
is.
true. Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Great. So yeah, last question, and this is one I've been curious about with you for a while,
Oh,
is
okay.
what other instruments do you play, and how do they help your saxophone playing? But like, the reason why I've been curious is because you're like pretty proficient on piano and drums, and I'm just wondering, how did
Not
you
that
get,
proficient.
I mean, I'm wondering, like, what did you do to get like decent at those instruments, or just be able to play those instruments, and how do they help your saxophone playing?
Right. Well, yeah. I play a little drums, I would say. A piano, very large exaggeration, I think, to call myself proficient on either one. Okay,
Yeah.
legit, either one. But like, especially piano. I like many other, I mean, I really just use the piano to write music. I'm fumbling through it so bad. There's like a couple things I can do, like, again, dexterity wise, but I don't play it. Like, I don't practice it. It was
Yeah.
any amount of anything that exists on the piano was only through what was forced upon me in general music school, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it's nothing. The drums, I just liked them. Like, I asked my parents for a drum set when I was in, I think, late high school, you know, and it was like, wasn't a good kit. It was some cheap thing, and I
Hmm.
don't even have it anymore. I would just mess around on it, and I've always just liked the drums. And like, when I'm listening to music, you know, like, I'm always listening to the drums and bass almost first, usually, especially if
Yeah.
it's something that's swinging. I love the relationship between the ride cymbal and walking bass lines. It's just always great, like the hookup. I love the hookup.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow, well, let me just swing on the drum set, you know? So whenever there's a drum kit around, I will just touch it and like try and play something on it terribly.
Yeah.
But I think the idea to go on to the other part where you said, like, how does it affect your saxophone playing? It seems like there's a lot of tenor players that like to play the drums from what I understand. Like Michael Brecker played the drums, John Coltrane played the drums, Joe Lovano plays the drums. Stephen Riley, who's this great tenor player, I think he plays the drum. Like, there's just the thing, you know. And the way it affects me is that, to be honest with you, I want to play the saxophone like a drummer for many reasons, many reasons. Like, that's what I want to do. I think Sonny Rollins kind of does that. I think Joe Lovano kind of does that. To some extent, Joe Henderson even sort of does that. Charlie Parker has a way of doing that too, right? He gets credited with his lines often so much, but the rhythm of those people's lines that I just mentioned, to me, and the articulation that they use, you know, whether that be articulating from their mouth, their tongue, or even just their diaphragm, like the rhythmic energy of their lines, to me, is very percussive. All those people, and I want to do that. At the end of the day, like, my knowledge of certain elements of music theory and things are they're hit or miss. Sometimes there's gray areas, you know. But like, to me, in my opinion, the rhythm trumps all of it. So if the rhythm and the phrasing and the melodic like integrity of what's happening has that drive behind it, then, you know, I'm like, you can get away with murder. You can get away with musical murder. Yeah. You know, so I'm always thinking about the rhythm first. So that's why I think the drum thing is like so cool. Because like, I'll sit around in my apartment and just like drum on my leg. I'll put on records and just like play. Not my, you know, my feet aren't doing anything. I have no coordination for the actual kit, but I'm just playing with the sticks and trying to like pound out rhythms and like phrases that fit in the pocket of whatever I'm listening to, just to get that energy.
It's liberating to know, I guess, that you don't need to use your feet to be able to exercise your capacity for rhythm. Like, and that's one thing I actually learned from you. You made some Instagram posts of you like playing on a phone book or playing on a pillow or something. And I was just like, oh, because I have these practice pads at home. Like I mess around with drums too. And we all use it to strengthen our time and stuff. But then I was like, oh, I don't need the foot pedals to practice drums. You know, you can still work on all those things. And that's a great distinction. But yeah, I hear such great time, feel, and interaction in your lines and the way that you're playing. It would be crazy to think that you don't play drums. Like, after hearing you play, like, it's very definitely percussive in many ways.
Yeah, I've joked around in my friend group before. It'll never happen, but I've joked that one day I'll buy a drum kit and like practice for like 3 months, and then like some foolish person, I'll like re-enroll into music school and try and like be a jazz drum major.
There you go.
Like, but yeah.
What a great use of your time.
Yeah, exactly, right? How genius would that be?
No,
I'm sure I wouldn't regret that at all.
I don't think you would regret the 3 months, but
no, certainly not.
Re-enrolling in music school,
it would be really, really goofy.
Yeah, I love it. Well, that's it, man. Thank you so much for all these great answers, and I'm sure you've given anybody watching this a lot to think about.
Well, all right.
Yeah, buddy.